Hello, and welcome to the next instalment of Insurance Unlimited, a podcast focused on helping people understand the wonderful world of insurance. Today, we're going to be focused on an area where I can only say I'm an expert from a consumer perspective. We're going to be looking at the wonderful world of price comparison websites. As mentioned before, I come from a commercial insurance background, an area that doesn't use price comparison websites or aggregators. And I'm really interested to see if there's any lessons learned we can take from our partners over in the personal line space, because I do think it's an area where sometimes we miss out. But obviously, I'm going to need some experts. And today, we've got none other than the wonderful Rob Cornish, John Cooper, and Karen Houseago. Hello.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Rob, we've got you down as the head of home at gotyoucovered.com. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's my current position.
Wonderful. And we've got John Cooper, commercial director, dynamocover.com. And finally, my partner in crime in insurance, we've got Karen Houseago, who's a strategic advisor at Endava. Welcome, Karen.
Thanks very much.
So first of all, could you give us a little bit about your background in insurance, and specifically, what I'm always interested in is how did you end up in insurance? We seem to have all these people that end up in insurance through, and they've always got weird and wonderful stories. Very occasionally, we get somebody that says, "I absolutely chose insurance and I studied insurance at university." I think it's happened once in my
Can
career.
you even study insurance at university?
You can.
Can you?
Yeah. I certainly studied it at college, which is the step
Okay.
before. Yeah, for in my the business qualification I did to go before I did my degree. You can study the principles and practice of insurance.
Yeah. There we go.
Which I might as well. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
I may as well continue that at that point.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, Rob. Tell us, you actually studied insurance. That's amazing.
I chose to do it. There was a local insurance broker. So John will be aware. John grew up in Leeds. I grew up in York. And in between, there's a brewery town called Tadcaster. And there was a broker who used to supplement his income from insurance broking as a teacher at our sixth form college, and I found it very interesting. But I wanted to go on and study law, which is what I did do. But that didn't work out so well for me, and I went into a career of sales. And it was my brother that actually went to work for Aviva, which was a big employer in York, where I'm from. I thought that they would not be interested in a guy like me. By the time I got into insurance, I was just under 40, and I just felt like I'd missed the boat on that one. But all of a sudden, there was an advert for a role for an insurance company that required somebody to manage major distribution channels, and that was something that I'd done quite a lot of in the IT and telephony space. So I threw my hat in as a ringer, thinking that I was going to be working in York. And at the time, the offices were about a 5-minute walk from my house, because I lived in the centre of York at the time. To my surprise, I got the job. But just before I got the job, the role turned out to be in Norwich. So it was a little bit of a commute. But that's how I got into it. I arrived in insurance via RAC, which at the time was owned by Aviva. That was eventually divested by Aviva about a year later. But at that time, Aviva were looking at starting their own price comparison play. And so I was the founding member of the QMH team. I was the fourth guy into the office for the Quote Me Happy brands. And eventually helped launch QMH and General Accident. And then more recently, I've been working with eSure, where I've launched some of their first products in the last 15 years or so, something like that, which is eSure Flex. And then just at the turn of the year, I moved over to become head of household insurance at Got You Covered. So there's a potted history of my insurance experience.
Wonderful. Karen, how did you fall into insurance?
So I started in marketing actually. I did quite a broad degree at university, but I went down the marketing route, worked for a marketing company, and then a role came up at LV. So living in Bournemouth, similar to yours, Rob, LV was 5 minutes down the road. It was Liverpool Victoria at the time.
Yeah.
Moved into LV about 5 years later, I think. Started in marketing, working on the loans side. And then moved over into insurance and started being the marketing representative for some of our third-party partners. Really enjoyed the kind of partner liaison side and got asked to move into the digital team and manage we're calling them PCWs or aggregators. Same thing really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'll go with aggregators. So
we'll talk about that, Karen. We should talk about that, shouldn't we?
I know. I always called them aggregators at LV, and then once I left LV, everybody referred to them as PCWs. So I kind of interchange the two now. So what was that? About 2008, I think. And at the time, LV only had, I think they had both car and home on 3, and CTM, Compare the Market, was just starting to launch and just starting to pick up speed. This was pre-Meerkat.
Yeah.
So it's kind of there for the launch of all of those. We launched Pet. We were with a software house. We came away from the software house. So went through these multiple kind of migrations. And my role basically led the PCW team. And it's everything, as you guys will know, from contracts, commercials, customer experience, loads of MI, performance data management. But then I got involved with the IT transformation when LV moved to Guidewire. Multiple regulatory things, which is always the most fun thing. Pain. Multiple things through the years. So I left LV in 2021. Moved to a B2B company who manage customer insight and data. So I was there for 2 years, and I'm now working with Paul, contracting at Endava. So working with their personalised partners and hopefully growing that side of the business with them.
Wonderful, thank you. And John, yourself?
So I sort of fell into insurance. I didn't necessarily even think I was getting into it when I started. So I got, long story short for me, so my background was always account management. So I worked for Scottish and Southern Energy for 8 to 10 years. And then I had the chance to go traveling for 12 months. So I went away, did the whole kind of backpacking thing. Came back, freaked out. Took me a little while to find a job. And I started doing some recruitment for a really good guy that was based in Cardiff, who'd actually helped set up Admiral back in the day. So we had quite close links into Admiral. And I was doing recruitment for Confused.com, which was a company that I hadn't heard of. So I'd been hanging around India and Indonesia and this, that, and the other for 12 months or so. But what I found was the more and more people I was looking for and the more and more roles that I was putting into Confused.com, I just wanted to go and work there. So I had a chat with the boss and said, look, there's some roles coming up. Would you mind if I put myself forward? And he was the kind of guy that said, if you want to do it, go and do it. So I joined Confused.com back in the early days, just after they'd launched home insurance. At this point, leading market share, had invented the category in 2001. Pretty much the day I joined, that all changed. So I think a week after I joined, Tesco launched. By this point, you already had a decent amount of competition from Money Supermarket, but also Go Compare had set up and had been founded by some of the original guys from Confused.com. So they set up and launched from Newport. And then, as Karen said, you had that kind of disruption, I guess, to what was becoming a sort of fairly established market from Compare the Market. But over the time that I was there, I joined as a relationship manager. I was there for, it was almost 17 years. So I left as chief commercial officer. So I had the odd job or two, in between that time. I led the commercial area for a bunch of years. I formed a couple of B2B functions there. So comparison as a service, where we were running comparison solutions for other big digital platforms. Set up a data unit that was very, very successful. I ran car insurance for a couple of years. And then, June last year, decided that it was time to do something else. So I took a couple of months off And then the last 6 weeks or so, I've joined a digital insurance broker called Dynamo Cover, who are based in Barry, which you'll obviously all be aware of from the various TV shows. And that's me.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you for that. It's always good to know how people end up in these wonderful roles. And just out of interest, well, it might not be interesting at all. I was going to be a police officer originally, and then completely pivoted and went to design and art college. And then pivoted again, just needed to get a job, and ended up as a broker in the Lloyd's of London commercial space. So very different world for me. Although some would say that we spend our life policing others, you know.
You've missed the best anecdote, that you grew up owning a sweet shop.
I did, yeah, that's it. Yeah, my parents owned a sweet shop, so there's something there around the creativity, the pick and mix element of it. And I still use pick and mix as an analogy every time someone's talking about building insurance products. I think it's just indoctrinated into my background. I'm getting onto the formal questions now, and John, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. So I suppose the question for me is, having worked in across aggregators for many years now, how do you think they've evolved over the time that you've been in the market? So for me, obviously, I've just seen it as a user. I've seen lots of choice emerging over the years, but from the internal perspective, how do you think it's evolved?
Okay, well, I mean, just first of all, I think that term aggregator, Karen and I were just joking about it earlier, but I think it's almost like a term that insurers tend to use these days. I think they try to pretend that this comparison service isn't indoctrinated in customers' behavior, if you see what I mean, on which it is, So, I'm not going to pick a fight about the naming, but I think back in 2001, when Confused.com launched, there were two things at play. One, the internet was just taking off, and Admiral wanted to increase its online distribution there. They saw a big opportunity. And secondly, the technology was opening up to enable people to do things differently. And there was a huge customer need. So third point, there was a huge customer need for someone to do something different. To get your insurance at that time was painful. It was, it sounds ridiculous now, but it was yellow pages out. It was ring 4 or 5 or as many as you can be bothered, to try and work out what the right thing for you was. So, Confused.com launched and then created a category that's just grown and grown and grown over the years. And you've got 90-odd% of customers switching through price comparison sites now, mainly for car, bit of home insurance, and some other products as well. Those other products are starting to grow. So I think if you look at the sort of evolution of price comparison sites, it's probably in sort of 4 phases. You had the sort of early days, and it was all around technology in those early days. I joined Confused.com when screen scrapers were still around. So this was customer put their details in, Confused.com would find a way to kind of push all that into an online web form. It'd take about 40 seconds, loads of them would fall over, but you get a handful of prices back, compare them, and then the customer could go and do their, do what they do. And then over the years, that's evolved, and that it's so easy now. You've got APIs, you've got all these integrations, and that's not really a barrier anymore for sort of PCWs. So that was kind of phase one. You had those early adopters, and whilst you had the sort of Admirals and the Quick Fits and 1 or 2 other sort of brand names that did really, really well early on, you had lots of insurers that were dead against doing it, if you see what I mean. And it took them a long time to get on board with that. So that was kind of the first phase. And you had the PCWs then trying to, you call it user experience, but it wasn't as you know it right now. It was really, how the hell can I get this customer through this journey without losing them? So you had a little bit of sort of experimenting early on there, and then the next big phase was where the sort of market share sort of found its place. You had the whole marketing side of things. So Confused.com did pretty well in the early days. As one of one, you can start opening up a category, and you sort of pave the way for everybody else. And then you had Gio Compario, the opera singer. And he was very, very successful, continues to be. But the real big one was obviously the Meerkat that Karen talked about earlier. And I think it was 12 or 18 months of compare the market, just constantly saying compare the market, compare the Meerkat, before they launched the cute little toys that they then gave away, which created this huge gap, and even today they've still got sort of 45-50% market share in those two products. So that really that was probably 7 or 8 years of kind of an evolving campaign and other PCWs trying to keep up with them. And then something changed, and whether it was customers finding it easier or more customers have more details entered into these sites, who knows? But the focus really then became on the sort of pricing. So that sort of natural evolution then was, how can I be the cheapest PCW? Because the gimmicks or whatever it might be, the cute campaigns, maybe that's not going to cut it for me as a customer anymore, and I want to make sure I get that best price. So that had a huge amount of focus. You saw external agencies spinning up to try and help the PCWs get more and more competitive. And it's quite a challenging sort of area to get into, but I'm sure we'll come back to the sort of technology later on. And then more recently, some of this from regulation, but some of it from a sort of consumer demand need, the focus has been more around the product and proposition. So it's, how can I, as a PCW, make sure I'm doing the right thing for customers from a sort of regulatory perspective, but also how can I grow and how can I do a better job for customers by doing something else? But I think that's kind of how I'd sum up the evolution of price comparison sites.
Yeah, very good. Karen, any thoughts there? And you've been involved from the beginning, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a really comprehensive answer, to be fair. I don't have anything to disagree with. I think one of the things I've noticed with can I call them aggregators or PCW? Where did we land?
What did we settle?
PCWs.
What did we settle on?
PCWs. I think it's that test and learn approach that they've done, and I think they all responded to the market really brilliantly as things changed and regulation kind of came in and customer needs changed. I think that was one of the things that stood out. And I think the way the aggregators worked with the insurers, at the end of the day, there's the top 4. They all work slightly differently, but most of them was so good at engaging with insurers and saying, I sat in a room, probably Rob, you were probably there, sat in a room with a PCW, and they literally walked us through their intended new customer journey, explained what they were doing, asked insurers to call out from an underwriting point of view and questions that are being asked, are there any kind of red flags? Are there any concerns? So that collaborative approach was slightly different for each aggregator, but brilliant across the board. So that was one thing I think has really helped their evolution. And that continued kind of A/B testing, test and learn approach, I think really helped them move with the times.
Yeah, it's a good point. Rob, from your perspective, I mean, it can't be denied that aggregators have got huge quantities of customers, right? So I think the latest statistics are 96.7% of people use them in the UK. Would you say it's quantity over quality, though, or, what's your perspective?
Not necessarily. I think, so just sort of following on from Karen and John's comments, I think one of the things that has come out of price comparison sites, I think it's made has simplified insurance and has simplified the acquisition of insurance over the years, and that was something I think the market was ripe for disruption at the time that it was disrupted by the price comparison sites, and so with simplification comes an element of I was about to say simplification again, but there comes this reduction in the ability of a customer to differentiate the products that they're looking at in in that small window of time. But I think the customers actually know by and large what they're getting, and they're almost sort of counted like for like. So they're just looking for quickly the best product that gives them exactly what they need. So there is a bit of dumbing down, but I think that broadly the customer is aware of what they're after. And I certainly don't think that the market would stand an intermediary that wasn't delivering what the customer wanted for all of these years. So in other words, I think there's just about the right amount of information for a customer to make the initial comparison, and then go into any further detail if they need to, and I think that the PCWs do that very well, hence their immense success.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, right? We talk about that. There's a top four, 96.7% of volume, but we've had the likes of Google and Amazon both enter and fail. Like, do you think there'll ever be a worthy opponent that's going to challenge the top four?
So I think there's been well, look, I'll just give a couple of pointers on my opinion about what's happened with new entries. So there's been over the years, over the last 15 years, there's been an insurer that's tried to bring a comparison service and then sort of given up. There's been, as you say, there's been Google and there's been Amazon. Now, I think what I think happened with Amazon, I think they were probably the best chance of a disruptor, because those guys understand distribution, and it doesn't matter if it's films or Kindles or or pen sets or printers, whatever it happens to be. These guys, really can get under the skin of selling a product. I suppose as long as they don't make too many demands on the items or on the people for which they're distributing product for, and so it's got to be equitable, and it's got to be fair, and I think although there was an initial interest, it's got to mimic, at least in the first instance, what the price comparison sites are doing. Otherwise, price comparison sites can make it quite difficult for them, and I think that's what happened there.
Interesting.
But what shocked me was they didn't really market it. So I know they didn't have that many insurers, but it's Amazon, they should have smashed it. They really should have smashed it. Google should have as well, to be fair. But what was interesting was, where was the marketing? John talked earlier about this evolution of marketing, and you've got your opera singers and your meerkats and goodness knows what else, but millions of pounds being spent on marketing every year. What did they do other than, I use Amazon regularly, as we all do. I've never seen insurance even advertised when I've used it. So how were they planning on bringing customers in? And I think similarly with Google, they never did above the line advertising either. They all relied on search, and it just didn't work for them, because they had some great tactics at the time. The commission levels alone were much lower, and they tried so many different things. But I just feel from a marketing point of view, they both fell short.
It's tough, isn't it? It's a really tough market to get into. You speak to somebody that's in charge of PPC accounts, they can give you the stats about how it's the most competitive category in the UK, and to some extent that focus on cheap acquisition and high conversion rate can create certain problems, if you see what I mean. But there's also Tesco as well, who had a go. So, you've had big supermarket, you've had Google, as Karen mentioned and Rob said earlier. I think their challenge was more of an internal one, wasn't it? That wasn't necessarily could they be a successful price comparison site. It was could they be a successful price comparison site without cutting off the huge amounts of income they're getting from their paid for channels. So I think they just had a huge conflict of interest there. But I guess what they did do was they acquired a small PCW. Beat that quote. These are like names from the past, aren't they? Like Uncle Albert here.
Oh, that is a blast from the past, isn't it?
But that's what happened, wasn't it? That's how they came into the market, and that's how they could kind of hit the ground running, and then it sort of stalled fairly quickly. Amazon, I mean, I think most people that have looked at that, or customers, are completely underwhelmed by that that product. I don't know what Amazon's intentions are or were on insurance. I'd be surprised if that's the end of it. I'd also be amazed if price comparison was their solution to getting into the insurance categories. I think if the rumor mill is right, then they've probably been trying to find a way in to actually sell products direct to consumers for 7 or 8 years or something like that. So on one hand, I think pretty poor entry into a market, didn't hang around long enough, didn't learn anything. On the other hand, maybe there were a few learnings there. Maybe they learned from some of the hidden placement that you maybe didn't see, Karen. Could they learn anything from running a few experiments on some of their platform, away from things like TV campaigns, etc., etc. Or has it just told them that price comparison is not the entry for them? It should be something a little bit more integrated,
more complex,
a little bit more sophisticated. But very complex, as you said.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of debate about this online, actually. You've just said you'll be surprised if it's the end of it. I've seen a lot of people with opinions. I think Amazon fail fast and they won't even have time to lick their wounds. They'll be on to the next thing. But it would be very interesting.
I think it's interesting from the Lloyd's market perspective. We all sat and watched it and said, well, it doesn't bother us, but if I was running a PCW, I'd be very worried. And then when you actually sit back and look at the investment that goes in to run those businesses every year, so all teams and teams of regulatory oversight, the investment in technology is vast, and that's not just at the PCW level, that's at the insurer level. Massive implementations for claim systems and policy systems. I think anyone that comes in might think that this is an easy market, and then within a few weeks you're like, okay, what do I do about claims platform? Build it from scratch? I mean, you're just not going to do it, are you? So I do think people underestimate how complex it is, and we 100% in the large commercial space underestimate what insurers are having to do to distribute their products in this way, the amount of time and effort, and vice versa. So I don't think it's the end of it. I think we will see a move, and we have seen a move from Google into the large complex space, a strong sort of, they're a partner of ours. They've got a really strong position in the Lloyd's market, and have done some fantastic innovation, and it's only a matter of time before that starts moving through the different segmentation. And so all good. I'm going to switch us a little bit now onto sort of the commercial aspects of it, because I'm fascinated by how it works with the PCWs. Having been involved in an intermediated market my entire life, one of the things we keep seeing is just the commission rates going up year on year, and it's kind of pushing the margins to the limit. We already know insurance is a low margin business. Do you think the rates can continue to rise? Is there not a breaking point coming? John, I'll go with you first on this one, if that's okay.
Look, I think the regulator's taking quite a close sort of look at this right now. PCWs are essentially an acquisition channel. So I think if you're a direct insurer that also has your own, let's say you've got a big brand, you've got your own marketing department, PCW is one of those channels that you're looking at growing. There's plenty of insurers that don't have that marketing capability or that brand power that solely rely on insurers. So it can be challenging, and I can see why those premium levels are being looked into. I mean, a lot of this is pushed by acquisition costs, and all the usual sort of cliches now about eyeballs on TV coming down. Google's really the one that's kind of winning from this, because they're the ones that run this dynamic auction, which inflates prices. So we're probably getting there. We're seeing some pressure on some of the other products where quite rightly the regulators saying, well, actually, our customers getting fair value from these products where commission rates are 40, 50, 60%, that kind of thing. And being very clear about what they think is a sort of sensible level of commission or acquisition charge. So are we at breaking point? Probably not. Will there be forces that continue to push them up, as well as long-term profitability? Yes. What's the answer? I don't know.
Rob, do you know the answer?
I wish I did, but just a couple of thoughts to follow on from John's, which were very interesting. Almost straight from the horse's mouth in terms of how PCW might think. When John alluded to or mentioned that there's been these acquisition costs have been investigated. There's been a number of investigations over the year with no less than the Competition and Market Authority and the FCA have also had a look in it. If you have a look at the answers that were put in at the time, the alternative, I think the reason why PCWs continue to endure is that even though the prices may be going up, they still represent really strong value. They're a success-based marketing, so you actually only pay when there's a sale made. So that's extremely attractive and de-risks the issue for an insurer. But the alternative is that the insurers do all the advertising themselves. Now you'll notice at the moment that my old outfit at Aviva and Karen's at LV, they still spend large amounts of cash actually advertising, via TV or whatever it is. And you might say, well, why is that? If most of the market is forcing people, most of the market is going via price comparison. Well, actually, what you want to do is give your brand the best chance of conversion when you do appear top, and so that's why they continue to advertise in that manner. But the other part of it is actually, if we go back to pre-price comparison, that means that every insurer has got to advertise on TV if there's no price comparison sites, and so that would be an even larger melee, and I think that the pressures on costs would be even greater. And then just to sort of finish off, just as it is at the moment, the difference between costs, the difference as it is between cost via price comparison and via actually a fully loaded customer through your own source is the delta is around about double. So let's say that it's around £60 for a price comparison sale. It'll be roughly double or even more via a direct sale.
Wow.
Once you've paid for the agent in the call center or the customer journey and all of that sort of stuff. So it's still a very cost-effective medium, despite increases year on year in terms of contractual costs.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, we're just used to, my world, we're used to giving away our commission to a broker, and that's kind of our only distribution channel. We don't use aggregators per se. You've got the likes of Actress in the UK for sort of SME type business, and which is a great digital channel. But anything on the large risk side, it's just all broker driven. So there are no other options. It's interesting because turning to technology. There's everybody wants more data. Everybody wants the latest technology. Do you think that the PCWs are well placed to use data and technology? And what do you think? Do you think there's more to come? We've got AI everywhere. Do you think there's opportunities there?
Yeah, and I will say I've technically been out of the game for 2 years. So I think Rob and John might be able to answer this a little better than me. I'm going to have a go. I think one of the challenges from a PCW point of view is they have such a vast array of different customers. That's the appeal. They have the specialized risks through to the easier risks that the majority of customers may be, and they've got to find a journey that appeals to everybody. And at the point of me leaving and my knowledge now, they haven't got as far as like an intuitive journey or one that can send customers off in different journeys. And I feel that's where it should be heading. I don't know how far down the road they are with that kind of thing yet. And I think that's where technology will obviously play a part. Since working in Endava, what I've learned and seen in the AI space has been quite mind-blowing. I've not really been involved in that before, and I think what I've seen just screams that it could be used on this distribution channel. It's just who is willing to invest and take that time, because to think about the whole kind of the whole world of aggregators with these different customers, and then you've got to work with 120 different brands who, some of them have great technology and integration times, others take months and months and months. I think anything that is going to affect that many people is going to be a huge mountain to climb. And I think that's where the biggest challenge is for them and how they go about that. What I did see was, and Confused was probably one of the best for this, was to work with one or two partners to do that test and learning and to launch forward and then to roll it out. But yeah, so in short, I absolutely think there's so many opportunities there. How it is done and when it is done, I think is up for grabs, and these guys can probably answer that better than I can.
Yeah, Rob, you're nodding along.
Yeah, I mean, to say Karen's been out of it a couple of years, I think the answer's more or less right on the money. You know, there's not much to add. I think the technology that's there should be there. I think there's still some way to go to use the technology that's there to be able to make a seamless customer journey. And it's got a lot better. I mean, John's described right at the beginning of this podcast the difficulties in using screen scraping and all of that sort of stuff. But I really do feel that the AGs are in the best place to just sort of inquire as to the name, date of birth, door number and postcode of a customer. And from that, they should be able to draw just about every piece of information that's commercially available out there for a customer to allow them to without having to type anything in. They know how many claims they've made. They know what car they're driving. So actually, if you're not driving this car, is there another car you're interested in? Type that in.
Yeah, of course.
That.
Yeah.
And it should be very straightforward. And this is why I thought actually to tie it into the previous part of the conversation around Amazon, that would be pretty interesting because they've got access to huge swathes of customer detail, and not only that, other ways of accessing customers. So, wouldn't it be great if you were sort of choosing your video on a Friday evening and you got an offer there for your home insurance? It's and you just clicked a button and that was it. You were covered, and they knew that where your house was and all of that sort of stuff. So there are opportunities, but it's got to be a fairly big move, and it's easier said than done. I think Paul is the key.
Yeah. Like most things, right? And moving, taking that first step and being that pioneer in a market which is quite used to copying each other, I would say. You don't get your best foot forward for long before somebody can copy it. And I think with AI, there's not a lot of run room there, right? You could launch something on a Monday and by Wednesday somebody else has built it, because actually the way you build tech is so much more advanced than what it used to be. We don't hide it away as much. John, any response from you on that one?
I agree with everything the guys have said. I think there's a couple of areas I think that where you can look at technology and said, everybody's done a brilliant job. I think around some of the ways in which PCWs and insurers engage with customers, whether it's running indicative quotes based on information they've seen or using third-party data sources, that kind of thing. Valuable service for customers, helpful. Most people own a car haven't got a clue when their MOT date is, so if you can help them, with a reminder, those kind of things, it makes a big difference. So I think some of that UX, that's been very, very helpful. I think in terms of acquisition, I think there's good use of technology there, and enhancing, sort of acquisition models, that kind of thing. That's a day in, day out battle. I think some of the collaboration between PCWs and insurers to help consumers receive more competitive quotes, very, very positive. That's something that's been in place for a bunch of years, but that's growing in sophistication. But I think the bit that the guys alluded to there, is there a really good use of technology between a PCW and all the insurers that use those PCWs? There are snippets, but not wholesale kind of use across. And having worked in a PCW, it can be quite challenging when you're running a pretty agile and quite a sort of dynamic tech business to work with 150 odd insurers who with all due respect, don't have that level of agility and are all at different stages in either their own technical transformation or, kind of migration projects and that kind of thing. And I guess as a kind of, I don't know if it's what the other guys would think about this, but is the insurance market, are they quite comfortable with the way that PCWs operate with customers right now? And actually,
don't rock the boat.
Does a kind of a huge shift in dynamic and increased focus on customers with loads of features that take away friction and that kind of thing, does that suit them? Question mark.
Yeah, I think you could talk about commercial and personal in that respect. I think everybody's quite happy with the status quo whilst people are making money, and it's not too much hassle. It's when they don't make money they start questioning their business models, right? And we're seeing an awful lot of that right now. To that extent, I'm going to start wrapping this up, but I'm going to ask one final question really of each of you. Karen, starting with you, do you think they'll still be around in 5 years' time? I don't want you to sort of, nail your colours to the mast, but do you still think there's a place for aggregators in 5 years' time?
100%. And I don't think it's going to be dramatically different. I think customers, it's down to the customer, isn't it? Customers like them, customers use them. And unless the customer's offered something that is a better experience for them, saves them time and saves them money, then I don't see customers moving away from them. They were viewed and are viewed by some insurers as the necessary evil, largely because they're so huge in the market. They have to work with them. It's not necessarily, it's certainly not how I feel, but I understand because, they take commission for the sale that they've closed, and that can be uncomfortable, but they need to continue working with them. They need to have good relationships with them, and they need to work to use the data, use the technology available to get a better experience for the customer, but also to improve those margins on both sides. Yeah.
Really good point. I think the competitiveness, like in the UK, we're quite lucky. We've got four, there's more, but like four main players. They're all competing against each other, which means that they're always trying to make their model a little bit better, make the customer experience a little bit better. And they've seen it advance quite drastically over the last 2 years as somebody that uses them an awful lot. John, your perspective?
I think there'll be a lot more focus on product over price. I think that will sort of happen in the next 5 years. I think you'll see increasing interest in some of the other product lines away from your traditional car insurance, home insurance.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And travel market's huge on PCWs, but others are growing in popularity as well. I think there'll be an increased focus on customer engagement and trying to remove some of those friction points as PCWs try to change it up and move away from that annual acquisition kind of model and sort of habit that they're into. I hope there's more focus on the customer, and I hope there's kind of a increased collaboration from everybody involved in the distribution chain to do a better job for customers. Do I think that will happen? Bits and pieces, I would say.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Rob, you're smiling.
Yeah, I think both John and Karen gave some really good points there. But again, you've heard it straight from the horse's mouth. There are the focuses, I think, for PCWs coming up over the years. I'm more of an observer, as I suppose Karen is from the other side of the fence. So my thoughts are.
Me too now, Rob.
Well, I know, John, but it's hard to, I don't really believe
you've been a nice guy today and just bringing a better balance. You know what I mean?
I don't believe
the PCW flag.
I just don't believe you've turned gamekeeper, John. If I'm being honest.
Thank you, Robert.
But my view of it is that actually the price comparison sites disrupted the market, the insurance market, before the word disruption became fashionable and bandied about a bit. And so I've acted as a consultant a few times over the years where a fintech's trying to arrive into the market and they're saying, well, we want to disrupt it by making it a really simple journey. Well, that's what the price comparison sites have done. They've reduced, to John's very early point, you've gone from having to do 5 or 6 comparisons where you're doing it over the phone or you're going into a shop even, something like that, to actually you just spend some time on one big question set and you get 120 prices back. So, the market is disrupted, customers understand it. I think they're going to be around. The other thing about the price comparison sites themselves is they're very good at doing what's next, and they're very good at detecting threats and reacting to it. And then, and sometimes that reaction is, well, they integrate or bring that they either copy the threat or actually acquire the threat and bring it in-house.
Yeah.
And so as long as that keeps going on and nobody gets lazy in a I'm going to say a Nokia style manner where they got really lethargic and just sort of said, well, these phones are they're not these iPhones are not going to last. And the next thing they're merging with companies you've never heard of. So I think as long as the price comparison sites keep doing that and they keep being good at what they're doing and keep an eye open for any emerging technologies, threats, opportunities, in some shape or form, they're going to continue. And I think it'll be really difficult to dislodge them. Not impossible, but difficult.
Yeah, I think my perspective is, from the outside, is there's so much acquisition potentially going on at the moment. We're seeing more and more and very, very large insurance companies emerging with that acquisition. That may be a threat, because what are they actually aggregating? Is the pool going to become smaller and smaller? But what we normally see is that when somebody does get acquired, somebody else comes in. There's a new kid in town that emerges as well that may have a slightly better product, slightly differentiation in service. So you're always going to need that. And I'm certainly a fan of the one-stop shop to go and get all my insurance needs. I can't see it disappearing. What could absolutely change my mind is that I'm not even involved in it. It's kind of just happening behind the scenes, and I've trusted somebody, or whether it's an AI or somebody else, to go and solve that problem for me, because I'm a bit too busy. But it's exciting times, and it's good to see. For me, it's good to see a side of insurance where the customer is as important as they are, and actually creating good user experience, good customer journeys for customers is the differentiator. I think that happens much less so in my market. I'm going to wrap us up and say thank you very, very much for giving us the time today. It's hugely interesting space, and one that I think will continue for a long time more. So Karen, Robert and John, thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.